I grew up believing my dad was a hero. He was a police officer, tall, broad-shouldered, always in his neatly pressed uniform with that shiny badge pinned to his chest. When I was little, I would watch him leave for work in the early mornings, his gun holstered at his hip, and I'd feel proud. My classmates would brag about their parents' jobs, but no one's story could beat mine. My dad protected people. He caught the bad guys. At least, that's what I thought. Mom used to say, "Your father risks his life every day for strangers." She'd always look at him with admiration, but there was something in her eyes. Something I didn't notice back then, a hint of worry. We lived in a modest house. Nothing fancy. My dad always said cops didn't do it for the money, but for justice. Still, somehow we never seemed to struggle financially. Birthdays were extravagant, Christmas presents expensive, and family trips surprisingly luxurious for a police officer's salary. I never questioned it. But things started to change when I turned 16. One Friday evening, Dad came home later than usual. He looked different. His uniform was a little rumpled, his expression tense. He dropped his keys on the counter and hugged me. His arms were stiff, not warm like usual. "Long day?" I asked. "Yeah," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Go upstairs, kiddo. I've got some work to do." I didn't think much of it until I overheard his phone call that night. I was in my room, but the walls in our house were thin. I heard his low, urgent voice. "No, it's done. Tell him he won't be a problem anymore. And make sure the money's ready tomorrow." Money? Problem? Who is he? I froze, my heart pounding. My dad never spoke like that. I pressed my ear closer to the wall. "I told you, I can't be seen with you in public. Drop it at the warehouse, same place as last time." Warehouse? My mind raced. Was he talking to another cop? Maybe this was part of an undercover operation? Yeah, maybe he was just doing his job. But deep down, something felt wrong. A week later, I got my first real clue. I had stayed after school for basketball practice, and Mom couldn't pick me up. Dad said he'd come, but when I called him, he didn't answer. It was getting late, so I started walking home. That's when I saw him. His police cruiser was parked outside a dimly lit bar, not a place I'd ever imagined a cop hanging around in uniform. I was about to wave when I saw something that froze me in my tracks. Dad got out of the car, and a man in a leather jacket stepped forward. They shook hands, but not in a friendly way. My dad discreetly slipped something into the man's hand. Cash. A thick stack of it. The man nodded, then walked back inside. My stomach twisted. I wanted to confront him right there, but I didn't. I ran home instead, my head spinning. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was paying for information. Cops did that sometimes. Right? The real breaking point came a month later. One night, I woke up to the sound of our front door creaking open. I peeked out my bedroom window and saw my dad loading black duffel bags into the trunk of his cruiser. They were heavy, I could tell by the way he struggled to lift them. After he left, curiosity got the better of me. I snuck outside and checked the garage. One of the duffel bags had been left behind, unzipped just enough for me to see inside. Money, bundles and bundles of cash, held together with rubber bands. I gasped. My dad wasn't just bending the rules, he was breaking the law. Badly. The next morning at breakfast, I tried to act normal. "Dad," I said, forcing a casual tone, "what's in those bags you take at night?" He froze mid-bite. "What bags?" "The ones in your trunk." His eyes narrowed. "Don't go snooping in my business, you understand?" There was a sharp edge in his voice that scared me. I nodded quickly, but inside I was shaking. Things escalated fast after that. One afternoon, while Dad was at work, I found a burner phone in his desk drawer. It was full of text messages. "Shipment tonight, 10 p.m. Keep the cops away from the docks. Payment confirmed. No interference." My chest tightened. He wasn't keeping the cops away. He was the cops. He was protecting criminals from getting caught. And then I saw the name. One of the contacts was Mace. I'd heard that name before. He was a notorious gang leader in our city. People whispered his name like it was cursed, and my dad was working with him. I wanted to tell Mom, but something held me back. She'd been acting distant lately. almost as if she knew something too. One night, I decided to test her. "Mom, do you think Dad's always honest?" I asked. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering." She didn't answer. That silence told me more than words ever could. The final straw came when I accidentally followed him into danger. It was a rainy Thursday night. I saw Dad leave the house in plain clothes, no badge, no gun. I grabbed my hoodie and followed him from a distance. He drove to the warehouse district and parked. I hid behind a stack of crates and watched. Mace was there, the gang leader himself, surrounded by men with weapons. My dad walked right up to him. They spoke for a while, and then my dad handed him an envelope. Mace opened it, counted the money, and smiled. I was shaking, trying not to make a sound, but my foot slipped on the wet concrete, and a metal pipe clanged to the ground. Mace's men turned toward the noise. My dad spun around and saw me. For a split second, his face went pale. Then he barked, "Go home, now!" I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life. That night, he came into my room. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten me. He just sat on the edge of my bed and said, "You don't understand the world, kiddo. Not everything is black and white. Sometimes you've got to work with the bad guys to survive." His words chilled me. I didn't know it yet, but my life was about to spiral into a dangerous game I never wanted to play. To be continued. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Dad sitting in that dark room, counting stacks of cash under the faint glow of a desk lamp, kept replaying in my head like a nightmare stuck on loop. My stomach churned. My chest felt heavy. And yet, the part that hurt the most wasn't the money. It was that my father had lied to me my whole life. The next morning, I skipped breakfast. Mom was already gone for her early shift at the hospital, so it was just Dad and me. He stood at the kitchen counter making coffee as if nothing had happened. "Morning, kid," he said, his tone casual, almost too casual. "Morning," I muttered, keeping my eyes on the floor. He glanced at me, then at my backpack. "Got practice after school?" "Yeah," I lied. I had no intention of going to practice. I had plans. That day at school, I could barely focus. My head was buzzing with questions. Who were those men? How long had Dad been working for them? And most importantly, was he in danger? Or worse, was I? When the final bell rang, I slipped out of the building and made my way to the address I'd overheard the night before. It was a small auto repair shop at the edge of town, one I'd never noticed before. The windows were tinted black, and the place looked deserted. I crept around the side of the building, my sneakers crunching softly on the gravel. There was a narrow gap between the shop and the fence. That's where I heard it voices. "The shipment's coming in Friday. Make sure he gets his cut." It was one of the men from Dad's meeting. My heart pounded. Another voice replied, "He's reliable. Been covering for us for years. Nobody suspects a cop." My stomach dropped. They were talking about him. I must have made a sound because the next moment I heard footsteps approaching the fence. Panicked, I ducked behind a stack of old tires. A man stepped into view, scanning the area. His eyes lingered for a moment, but then he shrugged and went back inside. I exhaled shakily and slipped away before anyone else could notice me. That night, Dad came home late again. I sat on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but really, I was waiting. When he walked in, I could smell the faint trace of motor oil and cigarette smoke on his jacket. "Hey, Dad," I said, my voice steady but my hands clenched into fists. "Can we talk?" He froze for a second, then nodded. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. I know you're working with those guys. I heard them today. They said you've been covering for them for years." His face changed instantly. The casual warmth drained away, replaced by something cold and sharp. "You followed me?" "I had to," I snapped, my voice cracking. "You're supposed to protect people, Dad. You're supposed to—" "Protect our family," he interrupted, his tone firm. "That's what I'm doing." I stared at him, confused and angry. "By helping criminals?" He ran a hand through his hair and sat down heavily on the couch. "It's not that simple. You think the department pays enough to keep us safe?" You think they care if some low-level crooks move a little product as long as they keep the big bosses happy? I take their money. I keep my mouth shut. And in return, they make sure nothing happens to us. That's the deal. I shook my head. That's blood money. His jaw tightened. It's survival. Over the next few days, things between us were tense. We barely spoke at dinner. Mom didn't notice, or maybe she didn't want to. But I couldn't let it go. I started digging deeper. I searched online for any news articles about the auto shop or its owners. I found nothing, at least. Nothing obvious. Whoever these guys were, they were careful. Too careful. Then, one afternoon as I was walking home from school, a black SUV pulled up beside me. The tinted window rolled down, and a man I recognized from the shop leaned out. "Get in," he said. My heart nearly stopped. "I'm good," I replied, trying to sound casual. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your dad wouldn't want you walking home alone. Dangerous neighborhood, you know?" I hesitated, then shook my head and started walking faster. That's when the SUV lurched forward, blocking my path. The man got out. "Listen, kid," he said, his voice low. "I know you've been poking around. That's not smart. Your dad's a good man, but he can't protect you from everything." He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne mixed with the faint scent of gasoline. "So here is what's going to happen. You stop asking questions, you stop following people, and you keep your mouth shut. Understand?" I swallowed hard and nodded. "Good," he said, patting my shoulder a little too firmly. "Now go home." When I got home, Dad was already there. I slammed the door and glared at him. "They threatened me," I spat. "Your friends. They pulled up in an SUV and told me to keep my mouth shut." He looked genuinely alarmed. "What? Who?" "You know who," I shouted. "This is what your survival looks like? Me getting cornered in the street?" He swore under his breath and grabbed his phone. "I'll take care of it." "No," I said, stepping back. "You won't, because you're part of the problem." He froze, the phone still in his hand. For a moment, I thought he was going to yell at me, but instead he sighed and set the phone down. You're right," he said quietly. "I crossed a line a long time ago, and now it's catching up to me." The next day, Dad didn't go to work. Instead, he drove me to the park, the same one we used to visit when I was a kid. We sat on a bench, watching the ducks on the pond. "I'm turning myself in," he said finally. I blinked. "What?" "I can't keep doing this. I thought I was protecting you, but all I've done is put a target on your back. I'm going to the Internal Affairs Division. I'll tell them everything." "Won't they arrest you?" I asked, my voice small. "Probably," he admitted, "but at least you'll be safe." That night, Dad packed a small bag and drove to the precinct. I waited at home, pacing the living room. Hours passed. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "It's done. I love you. Be strong." The next morning, the news broke a decorated officer had turned whistleblower, exposing a network of corruption linked to local businesses. Several arrests were made, but Dad's face was on every channel. Mom cried for days. I tried to be strong, but seeing him in that orange jumpsuit during visitation broke me. "You did the right thing," I told him through the glass. He smiled sadly. "I wish I'd done it sooner." Months later, the case was still ongoing. The criminals Dad exposed were facing serious time, and the department had quietly commended him for his cooperation, though it wouldn't erase his own charges. I visited him every week. We talked about normal things. School, sports, even TV shows. But there was always this unspoken truth between us. Our lives had changed forever. He'd fallen, yes. But in the end, he'd stood up for what was right. And maybe that's what being a real cop and a real father was all about.